The rain pounded against my windshield like angry fists, each drop obscuring my already limited vision of the deserted country road. My wipers fought a losing battle against the deluge as thunder cracked overhead, illuminating the dense forest on either side of me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white with tension. This storm had appeared from nowhere, transforming my peaceful drive home from my late shift at the hospital into a nightmarish journey. "Just 5 more miles," I whispered to myself, the sound of my voice providing small comfort in the howling chaos. My ancient Toyota protested as I navigated around yet another fallen branch. I couldn't afford a new car on a nurse's salary, especially not with student loans hanging over me like a perpetual cloud. The headlights caught something unusual on the roadside ahead, a flash of color against the grim darkness. I squinted, slowing down instinctively. It could have been garbage blown by the wind, or an animal seeking shelter. Then I saw him, a small figure, huddled against the trunk of a massive oak tree. A child, a little boy in blue pajamas, drenched and shivering, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. "Oh my God," I gasped, pulling over immediately, my heart racing. I grabbed my umbrella from the back seat and rushed out into the storm, the wind nearly tearing the flimsy protection from my hands. "Hey there," I called softly, approaching slowly to avoid frightening him. The boy looked up, his face pale and tear-stained. He couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 years old. "Are you hurt? Where are your parents?" He stared at me with eyes so dark they seemed to absorb the meager light from my headlights. His lips trembled, but no words came out. "My name's Ellie," I said, crouching down to his level, sheltering him with my umbrella. "I'm a nurse. I help people." I noticed a small cut on his forehead. Nothing serious, but enough to concern me. "Can you tell me your name, sweetheart?" "Matteo," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the storm. "Matteo," I repeated with a reassuring smile. "That's a beautiful name. Are you lost? Where's your family?" His lower lip quivered. "Papa," he said, before breaking into sobs that shook his tiny frame. I couldn't leave him here. The temperature was dropping, and hypothermia would set in quickly. My nursing instincts took over. "Matteo, I'm going to take you somewhere warm and safe, okay? Then we'll find your papa." I extended my hand slowly, giving him space to decide. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded and placed his small, ice-cold hand in mine. I guided him quickly to my car, lifting him into the passenger seat and cranking up the heat. As I retrieved a blanket from my emergency kit in the trunk, a strange feeling washed over me, a prickling sensation at the back of my neck. I scanned the shadowy tree line, suddenly certain we were being watched, but saw nothing beyond the curtain of rain. "You're safe now," I told him, as I tucked the blanket around his shivering body, though I wasn't entirely convinced myself. My apartment was closest, just 3 miles away. I could call the police from there and get this child warm and dry in the meantime. As I pulled back onto the road, Matteo clutched something in his small fist, a silver medallion on a broken chain. "Is that yours?" I asked gently. He nodded. "Papa's," he corrected in accented English. "Protect me." The medallion caught the light as he opened his palm, an ornate St. Michael design. Something about its craftsmanship suggested it wasn't an ordinary religious token. It looked expensive, old, perhaps European. "We'll keep it safe," I promised, focusing again on the treacherous road ahead. My apartment was a modest 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor of a converted Victorian house. Nothing special, but cozy, and mine. I carried Matteo upstairs, his arms wrapped tightly around my neck, his face buried against my shoulder. Mrs. Henderson from across the hall peered out curiously as we passed, but I managed a reassuring nod that discouraged questions. Once inside, I set Matteo down on my worn couch. "Let's get you dry and warm," I said, retrieving a towel and one of my oversized t-shirts that would serve as makeshift pajamas. While he changed in the bathroom, I made hot chocolate and called the local police. "Storm's got lines down all over the county," the dispatcher informed me after I explained the situation. "We've got every available officer dealing with accidents and flooding." "Can the child tell you anything about his family?" Just that he's looking for his father, I replied, keeping my voice low. His name is Matteo, and he has an accent. Maybe Italian? There's a medallion, too. We'll send someone as soon as possible. But it might not be until morning. Can you keep him safe until then? I glanced at the bathroom door, thinking of the frightened child behind it. Of course, I said, though uncertainty gnawed at me. After hanging up, I prepared my bedroom for Matteo and made up the couch for myself. When he emerged from the bathroom, swimming in my t-shirt, I had a mug of hot chocolate waiting for him. His dark eyes surveyed my apartment with surprising attentiveness for a child his age. "Do you live alone?" he asked suddenly, his English better than I'd initially thought. "I do," I answered, surprised by the question. "No husband? No babies?" I laughed softly. "No, none of those yet." I helped him onto a kitchen stool. "Matteo, can you tell me how you ended up alone in the storm?" His small face clouded. "Bad men," he whispered. "They took me from school. I runned away when they stopped the car." A cold dread washed over me. This wasn't a simple case of a lost child. "Someone kidnapped you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He nodded solemnly. "They said Papa would pay big money." Kidnapping. Ransom. I was suddenly way out of my depth. I reached for my phone again, but Matteo grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "No more police," he said urgently. "Papa says police no good. He will find me." "Your papa? Who is he, Matteo? What's his name?" "Salvatore Russo," he said with unmistakable pride. Everyone knows Papa. The name meant nothing to me, but the way he said it, as though I should recognize it, sent another chill through me. I made a mental note to search the name once Matteo was asleep. It didn't take long for exhaustion to claim him. After finishing his hot chocolate, I tucked him into my bed, the medallion clutched tightly in his hand. I sat beside him until his breathing grew deep and regular, gently brushing the damp hair from his forehead. Back in my living room, I quickly typed Salvatore Russo into my phone's search bar. My breath caught as the results loaded. Salvatore Russo, suspected head of one of the most powerful criminal organizations on the East Coast. Linked to everything from arms dealing to high-level political corruption, though never convicted. The few available photos showed a forbidding man in his 40s with piercing dark eyes and a composed, aristocratic bearing that belied his alleged brutality. And I had his son sleeping in my bed. My hands trembled as I set the phone down. I should call the FBI, not the local police. But Matteo's words echoed in my mind. "Papa says police no good." A sudden knock at my door made me jump, my heart leaping into my throat. The digital clock on my microwave read 1:23 a.m. No one would be visiting at this hour, especially not during a storm. Moving silently to the door, I peered through the peephole. The hallway appeared empty. Perhaps it had been the wind, or a branch against the building. Then a voice, low and controlled, came through the door. "I know my son is in there. Open the door." Ice flooded my veins. How had he found us so quickly? I hadn't even called the police yet, and they wouldn't have released my address anyway. "I have a gun," I lied, my voice wavering despite my attempt at confidence. "I've called the police." A soft, humorless chuckle. "If you'd called the police, there would be sirens by now. As for your gun, you're holding your phone, not a weapon. I can see your shadow beneath the door." I stepped back, startled by his perception. "I have no intention of harming the woman who helped my son," he continued, his voice carrying an accent similar to Matteo's, but more refined. "But I will not leave without him." I glanced toward my bedroom where Matteo slept peacefully. What choice did I have? If even half the things I'd read about Salvatore Russo were true. Taking a deep breath, I unlatched the deadbolt and opened the door just enough to see the man standing in my hallway. Nothing could have prepared me for Salvatore Russo in person. The online photos hadn't captured his commanding presence or the dangerous intensity that seemed to radiate from him. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore an impeccably tailored black suit despite the storm, not a drop of rain on him. His dark hair was streaked with silver at the temples, and those eyes, Matteo's eyes, studied me with cold calculation. He wasn't alone. Two men flanked him, their stances and alert expressions marking them clearly as security. One held an umbrella, explaining Russo's dry appearance. The other's hand rested inside his jacket, undoubtedly on a weapon. "Where is my son?" Russo asked quietly. I should have been terrified, and I was. But something unexpected flared within me. Protectiveness. "How do I know you're really his father?" I challenged, my nurse's instinct to safeguard the vulnerable overriding my fear. His expression darkened dangerously, but instead of threatening me, he reached inside his jacket. I flinched involuntarily, but he merely withdrew a phone, turning its screen toward me. There was a photo of him with Matteo, both smiling at the camera, the boy sitting on his shoulders in what looked like a garden. The resemblance between them was unmistakable. "His mother died when he was an infant," Russo said, his voice softening slightly. "He's all I have. The medallion he carries, it belonged to my grandfather." As if summoned by our voices, a small figure appeared behind me. "Papa!" Matteo cried, pushing past me and running straight into Russo's arms. The transformation in the man's face was astonishing. The coldness melted away as he knelt down, gathering his son close, murmuring in rapid Italian. When he looked up at me again, his eyes held a warmth I wouldn't have thought possible moments before. "You kept him safe," he said simply. I nodded, unable to find words as I watched this notorious criminal cradle his child with such genuine tenderness. "I'm in your debt," he continued, rising to his feet with Matteo still in his arms. "Russo family doesn't forget such things." Before I could respond, he turned to one of his men. "Give her the envelope." The security guard produced a thick manila envelope, which Russo held out to me. For any inconvenience, I didn't take it. I don't want money for helping a child in danger. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps respect. He tucked the envelope away. "Then perhaps you'll accept this instead." He removed an elegant business card from his pocket and pressed it into my palm. "If you ever need anything at all, this number will reach me directly." Our fingers brushed, and an unexpected current seemed to pass between us. His eyes held mine for a moment longer than necessary, something unreadable in their depths. "Good night, Ms. Oh, Ellie," I supplied automatically. "Ellie Mason." "Ellie Mason," he repeated, as though committing it to memory. "This won't be the last time we meet." It wasn't a question or a pleasantry. It was a statement of fact, a promise that sent a complicated thrill of both fear and anticipation through me. As they turned to leave, Matteo waved over his father's shoulder. "Bye, Ellie," he called sleepily. I raised my hand in response, but my eyes remained fixed on Salvatore Russo's retreating form. Only when they disappeared down the stairwell did I close my door, sliding the deadbolt back into place with trembling fingers. I leaned against the wood, my heart racing. The business card in my hand seemed to burn against my skin. I knew I should throw it away, forget this night had ever happened, and go back to my ordinary life. Instead, I carefully placed it in my wallet. I had saved a child tonight. I should have felt only relief that he was safely back with his father. But as I settled onto my couch, inhaling the lingering scent of expensive cologne that Salvatore Russo had left in my apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just made a decision that would irrevocably change my life. The storm outside began to subside, but another kind of tempest was just beginning. I tried to return to my normal routine in the days that followed, but Salvatore Russo's words echoed in my mind. "This won't be the last time we meet." Each shift at Memorial Hospital's emergency department blurred into the next as I checked every new arrival, half expecting to see his commanding presence. I jumped whenever my phone rang, though the number on his business card never appeared on my caller ID. A week passed. Then, too, I began to think that night had been a strange dream, a story I'd conjured during the storm, until the flowers arrived. I was finishing a 12-hour shift, my feet aching and my scrubs splattered with evidence of a particularly chaotic day, when Janine at the reception desk called me over. "Someone must really like you," she said with a raised eyebrow, nodding toward an arrangement that dominated the counter. White lilies and blood-red roses, artfully combined in a crystal vase that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "There's been a mistake," I said, even as I reached for the small envelope nestled among the blooms. The card inside bore just 3 words in elegant script. I remember everything. No signature, but none was needed. My heartbeat quickened as I touched one of the velvety rose petals. Secret admirer? Janine pressed, curiosity bright in her eyes. Something like that, I murmured, gathering the vase. I should get these in water. The weight of the arrangement pulled at my tired arms as I carried it to the staff room, aware of the stares following me. In 4 years at Memorial, I'd never received so much as a carnation from the hospital gift shop. I placed the flowers in my locker, keeping only the card, which I slipped into my pocket. As I changed out of my scrubs, my fingers brushed against Russo's business card, which I'd transferred to each pair of pants I'd worn since that night, like a talisman, or a warning. The parking garage was nearly empty when I left, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows between the concrete pillars. My footsteps echoed as I walked to my usual spot on the 3rd level. Where my Toyota should have been, a sleek black Audi SUV waited instead. I froze, my hand automatically reaching for my phone. Before I could dial, the driver's door opened, and a woman emerged. Tall, immaculately dressed in a pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her expression was professionally blank. "Ms. Mason," she greeted me, her voice carrying the barest hint of an accent. "Mr. Russo sends his apologies for the delay in expressing his gratitude." "The flowers were enough," I said cautiously, keeping my distance. "The flowers were a token. This," she gestured to the vehicle, "is gratitude." I stared at her in disbelief. "He's giving me a car? The paperwork is complete. Your previous vehicle has been taken care of." She held out a small leather folio containing what appeared to be registration documents and a key fob. "Mr. Russo insists on your safety. Your Toyota had faulty brakes and a deteriorating fuel line." My mouth went dry. How would he know that? She didn't answer, merely extending the folio further until I reluctantly took it. "There's a tracking system, isn't there?" I asked, already knowing the answer. A flicker of something, respect perhaps, crossed her face. "For your protection only," she replied smoothly. "Mr. Russo values your well-being." I should have refused. I should have handed everything back and walked away. But a crushing weariness swept over me, the weight of years of financial struggle pressing down. My Toyota had been on its last legs. I'd been saving for repairs but couldn't afford them yet. "Please thank Mr. Russo," I said finally. "But tell him I don't like owing debts I can't repay." The woman's lips curved into the ghost of a smile. "He anticipated you might say that. The envelope in the glove compartment addresses your concern." With a respectful nod, she walked past me toward a second vehicle I hadn't noticed, a black sedan with tinted windows, idling discreetly in the shadows. Alone again, I approached the SUV, running my hand over its gleaming surface. The key fob unlocked it with a soft click. The interior smelled of new leather and something else, the same cologne I'd detected in my apartment that night. I opened the glove compartment with trembling fingers. Inside lay a manila envelope identical to the one he'd offered at my door. This time, I opened it. Instead of cash, I found documents, student loan statements, medical bills, credit card debts, all stamped, paid in full. My knees weakened, and I sank into the driver's seat. Every financial burden that had haunted me for years, gone. The total had to be well over $100,000. No conditions stated, no repayment terms, just erased. I felt sick. This wasn't gratitude, it was ownership. Yet even as indignation flared, a treacherous voice whispered in my mind, "Freedom. You're finally free." I started the engine, which purred to life with a richness my old Toyota had never known. As I navigated out of the garage, I noticed the woman watching from her sedan, speaking into a phone, reporting to her boss that his gift had been accepted. My apartment felt different when I returned, smaller, shabbier in contrast to the luxury waiting outside. I poured myself a glass of wine, hands still shaking as I sank onto my couch, staring at the business card I'd finally taken from my pocket. One call would end this. I could demand he take back the car, reverse the payments, return to my struggle, but keep my independence. My phone rang before I could decide, an unknown number lighting up the screen. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Do you like the car?" His voice was exactly as I remembered. Deep, controlled, with that hint of an accent that softened the edges of his words. I closed my eyes, gathering my resolve. "Mr. Russo, I can't accept." "Salvatore," he corrected gently. "And you already have accepted. The payments cannot be reversed." "Why?" I demanded, anger finally breaking through my shock. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" A pause. "You saved what matters most to me. Such actions have consequences, Ellie Mason." The way he said my name sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. I would have done the same for any child. Perhaps. But it was my son you found. His tone shifted, became more intimate somehow. "Have dinner with me tomorrow night." Not a request, a statement, just like his promise of seeing me again. "I have plans," I lied. "Cancel them." I could hear the smile in his voice. "I'll send a car at 8. Before I could protest, he was gone, leaving me staring at my phone in frustrated disbelief. I spent most of the next day alternating between planning to refuse the dinner invitation and wondering what one wore to dine with a mafia boss. By 7:30, my bed was littered with rejected outfits, and I was wrapped in a towel, my hair still damp from the shower, no closer to a decision on either front. At precisely 8 o'clock, a knock came at my door, not the car service I'd expected, but Salvatore himself. I peered through the peephole, then leaned against the door, closing my eyes briefly. "I'm not ready," I called. "I'll wait," he replied simply. Cursing under my breath, I scrambled for the least revealing clothes I could find. Dark jeans, a blue silk blouse I'd splurged on years ago, and ankle boots with a sensible heel. I dried my hair hastily and applied minimal makeup, refusing to acknowledge the flutter in my stomach. When I finally opened the door, he stood exactly where I'd left him, hands clasped behind his back. Unlike the night we'd first met, he wore no suit, but dark trousers and a charcoal cashmere sweater that did nothing to diminish his authority. His security detail was nowhere to be seen, but I had no doubt they were close by. His eyes traveled over me slowly, appreciation evident. "Beautiful," he said simply. I fought the warmth that threatened to rise to my cheeks. I said I had plans, and yet, here you are. He gestured toward the hallway. "Shall we?" Against my better judgment, I locked my door and followed him. The restaurant was an exclusive Italian place downtown I'd passed many times but never entered, the kind with no prices on the menu and a 3-month waiting list. We were escorted immediately to a private room in the back, the maitre d' practically bowing to Salvatore. No one else occupied the space. Just a single table set with fine china and crystal, soft lighting creating an undeniably romantic atmosphere. My pulse quickened as Salvatore held out my chair. "You've gone to a lot of trouble," I observed, as he took his seat across from me. "For a worthy occasion." He poured wine without consulting me, a rich red that caught the candlelight. "You're uncomfortable with my gifts." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "I'm uncomfortable with what they represent." He raised an eyebrow. "And what do you think they represent, Ellie?" "Control," I said bluntly. "Obligation." Something like amusement flickered in his dark eyes. "If I wanted to control you, there are more direct methods." He sipped his wine. "The gifts were gratitude, nothing more. Nothing comes without strings in my experience." "Then you've known the wrong people." He studied me with unsettling intensity. "Tell me about yourself. Not what I could learn from having you investigated. Tell me what matters to you." The casual mention of investigation should have alarmed me more than it did. Instead, I found myself answering. "Helping people matters to me. It's why I became a nurse, a caregiver by nature," he noted. "Like with Matteo." "How is he?" I asked, genuinely concerned. Salvatore's expression softened, that same transformation I'd witnessed when he'd held his son. "Recovering well. He asks about you." Food arrived, carried by waiters who materialized and disappeared with practiced invisibility. Delicate appetizers I couldn't name gave way to pasta so perfect it seemed to belong to another category entirely from what I usually ate. As we dined, Salvatore asked questions about my work, my childhood in a small Pennsylvania town, my dreams for the future. He listened with surprising attentiveness, as though my ordinary life fascinated him. In turn, he shared carefully edited stories of growing up in Sicily, his migration to America as a teenager, his love of classical music and Renaissance art. Not once did he mention his business, though its shadow hung between us, unacknowledged. "Why nursing?" he asked, as dessert arrived, a confection of chocolate and berries that looked too artful to eat. "With your intelligence, you could have been a doctor." "Doctors diagnose and prescribe," I said. "Nurses heal. We're the ones who sit with patients through the night, who notice when something's wrong, who hold hands when family can't be there." I shrugged. Besides, medical school was too expensive. And if money were no object? His question carried weight beyond the hypothetical, given what he'd done with my debts. I met his gaze directly. "Money is always an object for people like me, Salvatore." "People like you," he repeated thoughtfully. "And what am I to make of that distinction?" "You know exactly what I mean. We live in different worlds." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "And yet, here we are, in the same one tonight." The intensity in his eyes made my breath catch. For a dangerous moment, I imagined leaning across the table, closing the distance between us. Instead, I set down my fork with deliberate care. "Why am I really here?" I asked. "What do you want from me?" He considered me for a long moment before answering. "Your honesty is refreshing. Most people in my presence tell me what they think I want to hear. I'm not most people." "No," he agreed, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You're not. That's precisely why you're here." Before I could press him further, his phone vibrated on the table. He glanced at it, his expression hardening instantly into the cold mask I'd first encountered. "We need to leave," he said, rising and signaling for the check. All warmth had vanished from his voice. "What's wrong?" I asked, alarmed by the sudden transformation. He didn't answer, merely placing a hand at the small of my back to guide me toward the exit. His touch was light but commanding, brooking no argument. Outside, his car waited at the curb. Not the SUV he'd given me, but a sleek black Mercedes with tinted windows. One of his security men opened the door, his expression tense. "Get in," Salvatore instructed, his attention already elsewhere, speaking rapidly in Italian into his phone. I hesitated. Whatever had interrupted our dinner clearly involved his other life, the one I wanted no part of. "I should get home. I can call a cab." His focus snapped back to me, dark eyes narrowing. "It's not safe." "Get in the car, Ellie." Something in his tone silenced my protests. I slid into the car, the leather seat cool against my skin. Salvatore followed, sitting close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the subtle cologne that had lingered in my apartment that first night. As soon as the door closed, the car pulled smoothly into traffic. The driver and another man occupied the front seats, both silent and watchful. Salvatore continued his phone conversation in rapid Italian, his voice low and controlled, but with an undercurrent of cold fury that made me shrink against the door. When he finally ended the call, the silence that followed felt suffocating. "I apologize for cutting our evening short," he said finally, his accent more pronounced in his agitation. "There's a situation that requires my attention." "What kind of situation?" I asked, then immediately regretted it. The less I knew about his business, the better. He studied me for a long moment. "The men who took Matteo," he said simply. "We've found them." A chill ran through me at the implication behind those words. The clinical part of my brain supplied unwanted images of what might happen to those men before the night was over. I looked away, focusing on the city lights blurring past the window. "I'll have Antonio take you home," Salvatore continued, gesturing to the driver. "Thank you," I said quietly, relief washing over me. Whatever was about to happen, I wanted no part of it. The car turned onto a residential street I didn't recognize. Upscale brownstones with perfectly maintained facades, far from my modest neighborhood. We pulled up to a corner house with wrought iron fencing and a discreet security camera above the door. "This isn't my apartment," I said, confusion replacing relief. "No." Salvatore's expression was unreadable. "It's one of my properties. You'll stay here tonight." Indignation flared. "I most certainly will not. Take me home. The men who took my son have connections. They know who you are, where you live." His tone was matter of fact, brooking no argument. Until this matter is resolved, you're safer here. How would they know about me? My voice rose with alarm, the same way I found you so quickly that night. He nodded toward the house. Everything you need is inside. I'll send someone for your work clothes in the morning. You can't just... I began, but he cut me off with a gesture. I can, and I am. His voice softened slightly. Please, Ellie, let me protect you. The plea startled me more than anything else. It seemed incongruous coming from a man so clearly accustomed to command. One night, I conceded reluctantly, and tomorrow I go back to my own place. Something like amusement flickered in his eyes. We'll discuss it tomorrow. He reached for my hand, his fingers warm and surprisingly gentle as they closed around mine. Thank you for dinner. Despite its abrupt end, it was the most pleasant evening I've had in some time. Before I could respond, he raised my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss against my knuckles that sent an unexpected jolt of electricity through me. His eyes held mine, dark and intense, communicating something beyond words. Then he was gone, sliding back into the car with fluid grace while another vehicle pulled up behind us. An identical Mercedes that must have been following us all evening. Antonio, the driver, escorted me to the door, unlocking it with a key card before handing it to me. The alarm is already disabled, Ms. Mason. Mr. Russo said to make yourself comfortable. The interior of the brownstone stole my breath. Soaring ceilings, gleaming hardwood floors, artwork that looked museum-worthy. Modern furniture in neutral tones created an atmosphere of understated luxury. Everything was impeccably tasteful, without the gaudy ostentation I might have expected. I wandered through the space, feeling like an intruder. The kitchen was a chef's dream, all stainless steel and marble. The living room featured a fireplace large enough to stand in. A wooden staircase with iron railings led to the upper level, where I found 3 bedrooms. The master suite was larger than my entire apartment, with a bathroom that included both a rainfall shower and a soaking tub that could easily fit 2 people. That thought sent heat rushing to my face. In the second bedroom, I found women's clothing laid out on the bed. Silk pajamas, jeans, and blouses in approximately my size, even underwear with tags still attached. The presumption both annoyed and unnerved me. How long had Salvatore been planning this? I changed into the pajamas, unable to deny their comfort against my skin, then explored the third bedroom, which had been converted into a home office. A laptop sat on the desk, alongside a framed photograph that caught my attention. Salvatore with a younger Matteo, both smiling at whoever held the camera. They stood in front of a sprawling Mediterranean-style villa, mountains in the background. They looked like any ordinary father and son, not the head of a criminal empire and his heir. Back in the master bedroom, I checked my phone. No service. The Wi-Fi networks visible all required passwords I didn't have. I was effectively cut off from the outside world, trapped in a golden cage. Sleep evaded me despite the obscene comfort of the king-sized bed. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with images of Salvatore, his commanding presence, the intensity in his eyes when he looked at me, the gentleness of his lips against my hand. And darker thoughts, too, what might be happening to Matteo's kidnappers even now. When I finally drifted off, my dreams were a chaotic blend of fear and desire. Morning arrived with the smell of coffee and the sound of movement downstairs. I tensed, then remembered where I was. Pulling on a robe I'd found in the closet, I descended cautiously to find an older woman in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared breakfast. She turned at my footsteps, offering a warm smile. "Buongiorno, Miss Mason. I am Sophia." Her accent was thicker than Salvatore's, her English more halting. "Mr. Russo say you like eggs. I make frittata." "Thank you," I said, accepting the mug of coffee she offered. "Where is Mr. Russo?" "Business," she replied vaguely, turning back to the stove. "He call later." I sipped the coffee, rich and perfect, of course, and wandered to the front windows. 2 men in suits stood on the sidewalk, seemingly casual but unmistakably alert. Guards, not captors, I reminded myself. Still, the distinction felt academic when I couldn't leave. After breakfast, which was delicious despite my unease, I found a bag containing my work scrubs and personal items from my apartment by the front door. The invasion of privacy should have outraged me more than it did. "Mr. Antonio bring for you." Sophia explained, clearing the dishes. You work today? I have a shift at noon, I confirmed, checking my watch. I need to leave by 11. She nodded, but something in her expression told me it wouldn't be so simple. I was right. At 10:30, as I finished dressing for work, the doorbell rang. Sophia answered it, admitting a familiar figure, the woman who had delivered the SUV. Ms. Mason, she greeted me with the same professional detachment. I'm Diana. Mr. Russo sent me to accompany you today. I don't need an escort to work, I protested. Nevertheless, you have one. Her tone left no room for debate. Your safety remains a priority. I bit back my frustration. Fine. But you're not following me around the hospital all day. A slight smile curved her lips. I'll be discreet. You won't even notice me. Somehow I doubted that. The drive to Memorial was silent. Diana remained outside in the SUV while I entered through the staff entrance, but I felt her watchful presence like a physical weight. You look different, Janine commented as I signed in at the reception desk. New haircut. I lied, though I hadn't changed anything about my appearance. No, it's something else. She studied me with friendly curiosity. Did your secret admirer send more flowers? I forced a laugh. Just the one bouquet, thankfully. How's the ER today? Quiet so far, she said, then lowered her voice. Hey, there was a detective asking about you yesterday. My heart stuttered. A detective? Why? Wouldn't say exactly. Something about a child found during the storm a few weeks back? She shrugged. I told him you weren't on shift and to come back today. I nodded numbly, my mind racing. The police had finally followed up on my call about Matteo weeks too late. What would I tell them? That I'd handed the child over to his father, who happened to be a notorious criminal, that I was now entangled with said criminal, sleeping in his house, accepting his protection. The shift passed in a blur of routine procedures and anxious glances toward the entrance, expecting the detective to appear at any moment. By some miracle, the ER remained relatively quiet. A few minor injuries, an elderly patient with chest pain that turned out to be indigestion, a child with an ear infection. During my break, I slipped outside to call my parents, needing to hear their familiar voices, to anchor myself to my real life. My mother answered, full of cheerful news about their retirement community in Florida. I let her chatter wash over me, responding at appropriate intervals while scanning the parking lot. Diana's SUV remained where she'd parked it, her silhouette visible behind the tinted windows. You sound tired, honey, Mom said finally, her maternal intuition cutting through my distraction. Just busy at work, I assured her. How's Dad's golf game? Terrible as ever, but don't tell him I said so. When are you coming to visit? We haven't seen you since Christmas. The question triggered a wave of homesickness so intense it nearly brought tears to my eyes. Soon, I promised. I love you both. After hanging up, I stared at my phone, my thumb hovering over Salvatore's number. I wanted to demand answers. When would this protection end? What had happened to Matteo's kidnappers? When could I return to my normal life? Before I could decide, my phone vibrated with an incoming text from an unknown number. Detective Michael Reynolds, Homicide Division, will arrive at 6:15 p.m. Do not speak with him alone. My blood ran cold. Homicide Division? And how had whoever sent the text known about the detective before I mentioned it to anyone? The answer came seconds later with another text. Diana will intervene. Trust no one in uniform. S. Salvatore was having me watched inside the hospital, too. The realization should have frightened me more than it did. Instead, a disturbing sense of security settled over me. Whatever happened, I wasn't facing it alone. When my shift ended at 6, I deliberately lingered in the staff room, dreading the confrontation to come. At precisely 6:12, my phone vibrated again. Exit through emergency bay 3. Car waiting. I hesitated only briefly before following the instruction, slipping out a side entrance typically used for ambulance transfers. Diana stood beside the SUV, door already open. Detective Reynolds is speaking with reception, she informed me as I approached. We have a narrow window. I can't just run from the police, I protested, even as I slid into the vehicle. You're not running, you're postponing. She closed the door and circled to the driver's side. Mr. Russo's attorney will contact you to arrange a proper interview when it's safe. Safe from what? I demanded as she pulled away from the hospital. What's going on? Why is homicide interested in me? Diana's eyes met mine briefly in the rearview mirror. 2 bodies were found in the harbor this morning. They've been identified as the men who kidnapped Mateo. The clinical part of my brain supplied images I immediately tried to banish. Bloated bodies, fish-eaten flesh, the evidence of violence before death. I swallowed hard. And they think I'm involved? My voice sounded distant to my own ears. They know you found Mateo. They're connecting dots. Her tone remained professional, detached. Mr. Russo is handling it. Handling it how? I asked, though I feared I knew the answer. Her silence was confirmation enough. We didn't return to the brownstone, but drove instead to a high-rise apartment building downtown, with a discreet security presence in the lobby. The elevator required a keycard for access to the upper floors. Diana escorted me to the penthouse level, then stepped back as the doors opened. Mr. Russo is waiting, she said simply. The penthouse took my breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city skyline, now glittering with evening lights. The decor was similar to the brownstone, but even more luxurious, with custom furniture and what appeared to be original artwork on the walls. The space breathed wealth and power, but with understated elegance rather than gaudy display. Salvatore stood by the windows, his back to me, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, his posture rigid with tension. The city lights cast his silhouette in sharp relief, a dark figure against the glimmering backdrop. You should have told me about the detective, I said without preamble. He turned slowly, his expression unreadable in the dim light. I just did. Through a text? After they were already looking for me? My voice rose with indignation. 2 men are dead, Salvatore. 2 kidnappers who would have killed my son if their demands weren't met. His voice remained calm, but with an edge of steel beneath. Men who knew your face, your name, where you worked. Did you kill them? The blunt question hung in the air between us. Salvatore studied me for a long moment, then set his glass down on a side table and moved closer. Would it matter if I said no? He asked quietly. I met his gaze without flinching. It would matter to me. Something flickered across his face. Respect, perhaps, or surprise at my directness. He gestured to a plush sofa. Sit, please. I remained standing. Answer the question. I gave orders to find them and bring them to me for questioning, he said finally. They resisted. Things escalated. His tone was matter-of-fact, as if discussing a business transaction rather than deaths he'd orchestrated. Their associates remain a threat to you. To me, or to you, I challenged. I'm a liability now, a witness who can connect you to Mateo's kidnapping. His eyes narrowed. You think I'm protecting you to silence you? Aren't you? In 3 quick strides, he closed the distance between us. I forced myself not to step back as he loomed over me, his presence overwhelming in the dimly lit room. If I wanted you silenced, Ellie, he said, his voice a low growl, we wouldn't be having this conversation. A shiver ran through me. Fear, yes, but something else too. Something I didn't want to acknowledge. I swallowed hard. Then why am I here? Why all this? I gestured around the penthouse, the car, paying my debts, the protection. What do you want from me? You. The single word hung in the air between us, charged with meaning. From the moment I saw you standing in your doorway, defying me to protect a child you'd just met, I knew you were different. His confession stunned me into silence. I'd expected manipulation, control, perhaps even threats, not this raw honesty. This is insanity, I whispered finally. You don't even know me. I know enough. He reached up, his fingers brushing my cheek with surprising gentleness. You're compassionate but fierce, practical, yet idealistic. Beautiful. Though you don't see it yourself. I should have pulled away. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch, my body betraying my better judgment. I can't be part of your world, I said, the words catching in my throat. What you do, who you are. Who I am is a father who protects what's his His hand slid to the nape of my neck, warm and possessive. A man who sees what he wants and takes it. "I'm not something to be taken," I protested, even as my pulse quickened. A smile curved his lips. "No, you're something to be earned." His thumb traced my jawline. "And I'm a very patient man, Ellie Mason." The intensity in his dark eyes made it difficult to breathe. I was acutely aware of his proximity, the heat radiating from his body, the subtle scent of his cologne mingling with something uniquely him. My gaze dropped involuntarily to his mouth. The moment stretched between us, taut with possibility. Then a sound from the hallway broke the spell. A door opening and closing, followed by a child's voice calling out in Italian. Salvatore stepped back, his expression softening as he turned toward the sound. "In here, Matteo." The boy appeared in the doorway, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Ellie!" he cried, rushing forward to wrap his arms around my waist. "You came back." I knelt to his level, genuinely pleased to see him looking healthy and happy. "Hello, Matteo. I'm glad you're safe." He beamed at me, dark eyes, so like his father's, sparkling with excitement. "Papa said you might come live with us." "Are you going to be my new mama?" Heat rushed to my face as I glanced up at Salvatore, who looked both amused and slightly chagrined by his son's directness. "Matteo," he chided gently, "remember what we discussed about patience." The boy's expression turned serious as he nodded. "Sorry, Papa." He turned back to me. "But you will stay for dinner, yes? Rosa made ossobuco." Before I could answer, a woman appeared in the doorway, an older Italian woman with a stern face that softened as she observed Matteo. "Time for hand-washing, Piccolo," she announced. "Dinner in 20 minutes. Matteo sighed dramatically, but obeyed, giving me another quick hug, before following his nanny from the room. As their footsteps receded down the hallway, I rose slowly to my feet, avoiding Salvatore's gaze. "You told your son I might live with you?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. He overheard a conversation. Salvatore replied, "Children make assumptions." He gestured toward a hallway. "The bathroom is through there, if you'd like to freshen up before dinner." The abrupt change of subject disoriented me. I nodded mutely and retreated to gather my thoughts. The bathroom was predictably luxurious, with marble surfaces and gold fixtures. I stared at my reflection in the ornate mirror, barely recognizing myself. Had it really been only 2 weeks since I'd found Matteo in the storm? I looked the same outwardly, but something fundamental had shifted. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to clear my head. Dinner with Salvatore and Matteo. Playing house with a Mafia boss and his son. How had my life taken this surreal turn? My phone vibrated in my pocket. A text from the hospital administrator asking about my abrupt departure and mentioning Detective Reynolds had left his card. Reality intruding on this alternate world I'd stumbled into. When I returned to the living room, Salvatore had opened a bottle of wine and stood by a dining table now set for 3. He looked up as I entered, his expression softening in a way I was beginning to recognize, a vulnerability he showed to very few, I suspected. "I should call the detective," I said, holding up my phone. "Running makes me look guilty. My attorney will handle it." He offered me a glass of wine. "The official story is simple. You found a child, called the police, and the father arrived before they did. You never saw the child again. That's a lie." "A simplification," he corrected. "The less you're involved, the safer you are." "From the police or from your enemies?" I asked, accepting the wine despite my better judgment. "Both." He held my gaze. "The men who took Matteo worked for someone else. Someone who wants to hurt me through my son." The implication chilled me. Another crime family? An old rival. His expression darkened. "Until the situation is resolved, anyone connected to me needs protection." "I'm not connected to you," I protested weakly. His smile was both predatory and oddly tender. "We both know that's no longer true." Before I could respond, Matteo bounded back into the room, followed by Rosa carrying a steaming dish that filled the air with a mouth-watering aroma. The moment for argument had passed. Dinner was surreal. Delicious food. Matteo's cheerful chatter about school and his friends. Salvatore transforming into a doting father who gently corrected his son's table manners and listened attentively to his stories. In these moments, It was easy to forget who Salvatore was, what he did for a living. Until his phone vibrated, and that mask of normalcy slipped for an instant, revealing the calculating hardness beneath. He excused himself briefly, speaking in rapid Italian in the hallway before returning with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Everything okay?" I asked quietly, as Matteo engaged Rosa in an animated description of a school project. "A minor business matter," Salvatore replied smoothly. "Nothing to concern yourself with," but the reminder of his business had shattered the domestic illusion. I set down my fork, appetite suddenly gone. "I should go home. My shift starts early tomorrow. You'll stay here tonight," Salvatore said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a suggestion. "Diana will take you to work in the morning." "I can't just disappear from my life," I argued, keeping my voice low to avoid alarming Matteo. "People will ask questions. Let them." He reached across the table, his fingers closing around my wrist with gentle pressure. "Your safety matters more than gossip." I wanted to pull away, to assert my independence, but the warmth of his touch sent a treacherous thrill through me. I caught Matteo watching us, a hopeful smile playing on his lips, and felt a pang of guilt. This child had lost his mother. Now he was projecting those needs onto me, the woman who'd found him in the storm. "One more night," I conceded finally. "But tomorrow, we figure out a more permanent solution that doesn't involve me becoming a prisoner, no matter how gilded the cage." Something like respect flickered in Salvatore's eyes. "Agreed. We'll discuss terms tomorrow." After dinner, Rosa took Matteo off for his bath and bedtime routine, but not before he extracted a promise from me to read him a story. Left alone with Salvatore again, I felt the tension between us resurface. "You're good with him," he observed, pouring us each another glass of wine. "He's taken with you." "He's a wonderful child," I said honestly. "You've raised him well." A shadow crossed his face. "I've tried." After his mother died, he trailed off, then shook his head. "I've made many mistakes, but Matteo is the one thing in my life I refuse to fail at." The raw emotion in his voice touched something in me. "How did she die?" I asked softly. "His mother?" Salvatore was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was distant, as if the memory still pained him. "Carlotta was caught in the crossfire of a hit meant for me. Matteo was just a year old." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "I've kept him sheltered from my business," he continued, "sent him to normal schools, tried to give him as ordinary a childhood as possible." His laugh held no humor. "Then they took him anyway. And now?" "Now I keep him closer. More security, fewer risks." His eyes met mine, intense and unwavering. "I protect what's mine, Ellie, whatever it costs." The possessive undertone sent a shiver through me. "Matteo is yours, I'm not." He studied me over the rim of his wineglass. Yet the single word hung between us, a promise or a threat, perhaps both. "Papa," Matteo's voice called from down the hallway. "I'm ready for my story." Salvatore's expression softened immediately. "Duty calls," he said, setting down his glass. "Make yourself comfortable. We'll continue our conversation later." I watched him go, conflicting emotions warring within me. Attraction, fear, curiosity, wariness, all tangled together in a knot I couldn't unravel. The rational part of me knew I should leave, call the police, return to my normal life. The woman I'd been 2 weeks ago would have done exactly that, but that woman hadn't seen Salvatore Russo with his son, hadn't felt his touch or experienced the intoxicating sense of being the sole focus of his intense attention, hadn't glimpsed the man beneath the monster the world believed him to be. I sipped my wine, staring out at the city lights below, wondering which version was real. The ruthless criminal who ordered deaths without remorse, or the devoted father who read bedtime stories. Perhaps they both were, and that realization terrified me more than anything else. I must have dozed off on the living room sofa, because I woke to find Salvatore draping a cashmere throw over me. The city lights beyond the windows had dimmed, and the penthouse was silent, except for the soft ticking of an ornate clock. "What time is it?" I murmured, disoriented by sleep. "Just after midnight," he answered, his voice a low rumble in the stillness. "Matteo is asleep. I've prepared the guest room for you." I sat up, rubbing my eyes. I should have said goodnight to him. A smile softened Salvatore's features. He fell asleep halfway through the third story. I'll tell him you'll see him at breakfast. The casual domesticity of the statement jarred me fully awake. This wasn't my life, this luxury, this family. I was a nurse from a small town who lived paycheck to paycheck in a cramped apartment, not whatever fantasy Salvatore seemed to be constructing around me. About tomorrow, I began, gathering my courage. I meant what I said. I can't keep living like this, shuttled between safe houses, watched constantly, cut off from my real life. He sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Your real life, as you call it, is no longer safe, not until this threat is neutralized. And when will that be? I challenged. A week? A month? Years? I can't put my life on hold indefinitely because of your enemies. Something dangerous flickered in his dark eyes. You're alive because of my protection. The men who took Matteo had your photograph, your address, your work schedule. They were planning to use you to get to him again. My blood ran cold. How do you know that? They told me before they died. The matter-of-fact statement hung in the air between us, a stark reminder of the violence that underpinned his world. I shuddered involuntarily. I understand this is difficult, he continued, his tone softening. But I will not risk your safety, Ellie. Not when I can prevent it. By keeping me prisoner? My voice caught on the word. Salvatore's expression hardened. By keeping you alive. He took my hand, his grip firm, but not painful. Do you think this is what I want? To have you here by force rather than choice? To see fear in your eyes when you look at me? The raw emotion in his voice surprised me. Then what do you want? I told you earlier. I want you. His thumb traced circles on my palm, sending sparks of sensation up my arm. Here willingly. Looking at me the way you did during dinner. Like you were seeing the man, not the monster. My heart hammered in my chest. There was no denying the pull between us, the chemistry that seemed to charge the air whenever we were close, but there was also no escaping the reality of who he was. I can't separate the two, I said honestly. The man and the monster, they're the same person. We all have darkness in us, Ellie. His gaze bore into mine. Even you. I pulled my hand away, needing distance to think clearly. My darkness doesn't involve ordering executions. No, he agreed, but it might involve being drawn to a man who does. The accuracy of his observation stung. I stood abruptly, moving to the window to escape his penetrating gaze. The city stretched out below, oblivious to the drama unfolding above. There has to be a middle ground, I said finally, watching my reflection in the glass. I won't live in a cage, Salvatore, no matter how luxurious. But I understand the threat is real. He moved behind me, not touching, but close enough that I could feel his presence like a physical force. What do you propose? I turned to face him, gathering my resolve. I returned to my apartment, my job, my normal routine. Your people can watch from a distance, but they don't interfere unless there's an actual threat. No drivers, no escorts into the hospital, nothing that draws attention. His expression darkened. Too dangerous. I wasn't finished, I countered. In exchange, I agree to certain security measures. The car you gave me, with whatever tracking system it has. A panic button or whatever you use. Regular check-ins. I took a deep breath. And I agree to see you, dinners, time with Matteo, of my own free will. Surprise flickered across his features. You're offering a compromise. I'm offering a choice, I corrected. Imprisonment, even for my protection, will make me resent you eventually. Is that what you want? His eyes searched mine, calculating, assessing. And if I agree to these terms, you would willingly continue to see me? Knowing what I am? The question cut to the heart of my internal conflict. I don't know what this is between us, I admitted quietly. Attraction, Stockholm Syndrome, temporary insanity. But yes, I would continue to see you, because I need to understand it. Something shifted in his expression. Triumph, perhaps, or satisfaction. He reached out, his fingers grazing my cheek with unexpected tenderness. You're a fascinating woman, Ellie Mason. Is that a yes? I pressed, fighting the urge to lean into his touch, with modifications. His hand slipped to the nape of my neck, a possessive gesture that sent heat spiraling through me. You'll stay at the brownstone, not your apartment. It's more secure, and no one knows you're connected to it yet. Your movements remain monitored, but more discreetly, and you will allow Diana to escort you for the next week at least, until my sources confirm the immediate threat has passed. I started to protest, but he silenced me with a gentle squeeze of my neck. This isn't negotiable, Ellie. Not if you want your freedom. The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me, but I recognized the concession for what it was. 1 week, I agreed reluctantly, and then we reassess. A smile curved his lips, triumphant but somehow tender. 1 week, he echoed, his thumb tracing my jawline. Now, shall I show you to your room? The invitation hung between us, laden with implication. I knew with absolute certainty that if I gave any sign, any hint that I wanted more, Salvatore would take it, take me, without hesitation. The knowledge sent a thrill of both fear and desire through me. Yes, I said finally, stepping back from his touch. The guest room. Something like respect flickered in his eyes. He nodded once and turned, leading me down a hallway lined with what appeared to be original artwork. The guest room was sumptuous, with a king-sized bed and an ensuite bathroom that rivaled luxury hotels. A silk nightgown had been laid out on the bed, along with toiletries in the bathroom. You planned for this, I observed. I plan for all contingencies, he replied simply. Sleep well, Ellie. He hesitated at the doorway, and for a heart-stopping moment, I thought he might kiss me. Instead, he merely inclined his head and withdrew, closing the door softly behind him. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, sinking onto the edge of the bed. What was I doing? Making deals with a mafia boss, agreeing to see him socially, feeling this undeniable pull toward a man whose hands were stained with blood? Yet as I changed into the nightgown and slid between the silk sheets, I couldn't deny the strange sense of rightness that had settled over me. For better or worse, Salvatore and Matteo Russo had entered my life that stormy night, and nothing would ever be the same. Dawn broke with the sound of childish laughter and the smell of coffee. I dressed in clothes that had mysteriously appeared in the closet overnight, all in my size, all designer labels I couldn't pronounce, and followed the sounds to the kitchen. Matteo sat at the breakfast bar, giggling as Salvatore flipped pancakes with theatrical flair. Neither noticed me immediately, and I paused to observe this domestic tableau. Salvatore wore no suit jacket, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms dusted with dark hair. Matteo's school uniform was impeccable, his dark hair neatly combed. They looked like any normal father and son sharing breakfast before the day began. Then Matteo spotted me. Ellie, you stayed. His joy was so genuine it warmed something inside me. Papa is making pancakes. He only does it on special days. Salvatore turned, and the smile he gave me sent my pulse racing. Good morning, he said, his voice a rumble that seemed to vibrate through my chest. Coffee? Please. I took the seat beside Matteo, who immediately launched into a detailed explanation of his school project on dinosaurs. The normalcy of the moment was disarming. For a brief time, I could almost forget the circumstances that had brought me here. The kidnapping, the deaths, the threat still hanging over us, almost. Reality intruded when Diana arrived as we finished breakfast, her professional demeanor a stark contrast to our domestic tranquility. The car is ready, Ms. Mason, she announced. Your shift begins in 90 minutes. Matteo's face fell. You're leaving? But you just got here. I knelt to his level, unable to resist the urge to comfort him. I have to go to work, sweetheart. There are people who need my help, just like you needed help that night in the storm. He considered this solemnly. Will you come back? I glanced up at Salvatore, who watched us with an unreadable expression. Yes, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. I'll come back. Matteo's smile could have lit the room. He threw his arms around my neck in an impulsive hug, then allowed Rosa to usher him off to gather his school things. Alone with Salvatore, I felt the weight of my promise settle around me. "I meant it," I said before he could speak. "I'll honor our agreement." He nodded, satisfaction evident in his dark eyes. "Diana will bring you to the brownstone after your shift. Everything you need will be there." He moved closer, into my personal space, his presence overwhelming in its intensity. "1 week, Ellie. Then we'll reassess." 1 week, I echoed, trying to ignore the flutter in my stomach when he reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. "Be careful today," he murmured, his fingers lingering against my skin. "Remember that detective may still be looking for you." "I can handle a detective," I said with more confidence than I felt. A smile curved his lips. "I've no doubt. It's one of the many things I admire about you." Before I could respond, he leaned in and pressed his lips to my forehead. Not quite a kiss, more a branding. "Until tonight," he said, his breath warm against my skin. Then he was gone, striding toward his office with the fluid grace of a predator. Diana cleared her throat discreetly from the doorway, reminding me of the world waiting beyond this strange interlude. The week that followed settled into an unexpected rhythm. Days spent at the hospital, maintaining a facade of normalcy while fielding questions about my new car and sudden absences. Evenings at the brownstone with regular visits from Salvatore and Matteo. Diana's presence became less intrusive, more like a shadow I acknowledged but didn't engage with. Detective Reynolds appeared at the hospital twice more, but each time I was mysteriously called away to an urgent case. Salvatore's influence, I assumed, though he never mentioned it during our dinners. And there were many dinners, sometimes with Matteo, sometimes just the two of us after the boy was asleep. Salvatore revealed himself in careful increments, his childhood in Sicily, his love of opera, his unexpected knowledge of Renaissance art. I found myself sharing too, stories of nursing school, my parents' retirement to Florida, my dreams of someday opening a community clinic. We circled each other carefully, the attraction between us growing with each conversation, each lingering touch, each unspoken promise in his dark eyes. But he never pushed, never presumed, respecting the boundaries I'd established, even as his gaze made it clear he wanted more. On the 7th day, the day our agreement was to be reassessed, I returned to the brownstone to find it transformed. Candles flickered throughout the living room, casting a warm glow over flowers arranged in crystal vases. A table was set for 2 on the terrace, with a view of the city now bathed in sunset hues. Diana met me at the door with an unusual smile. "Mr. Russo asked me to inform you he'll arrive at 8. Your dress is laid out upstairs." With that, she departed, leaving me alone in the romantic setting. Upstairs, I found a midnight blue gown spread across the bed, silk and lace, elegant yet undeniably sensual. Beside it lay a velvet box containing a simple diamond pendant on a platinum chain. The card read, "No strings. S." I fingered the exquisite jewel, understanding the message beneath the gift. Tonight was a turning point, the end of our agreement, the beginning of... what? As I showered and dressed, applying more care to my appearance than I had in years, I confronted the truth I'd been avoiding all week. I was falling for Salvatore Russo. The criminal, the father, the complicated man who'd upended my carefully ordered life. The realization should have terrified me. Instead, it brought a strange sense of clarity. When the doorbell rang at precisely 8 o'clock, I descended the staircase with deliberate slowness, watching Salvatore's expression as he took me in. His eyes darkened with unmistakable desire, but there was something else too, a tenderness that belied his dangerous reputation. "You're beautiful," he said simply, offering me a single red rose. I accepted it, our fingers brushing in a touch that sent electricity through my veins. "Thank you for the dress. And the necklace. They're merely settings for the real jewel." His gaze held mine, intense and unwavering. "Have you decided?" No need to specify what decision he meant. We both knew this dinner represented a choice. Walk away from the danger and complexity he represented, or step willingly into his world. I touched the diamond at my throat. "I'm still here." The smile that transformed his face took my breath away. He extended his hand, and this time, I took it without hesitation. Whatever came next, Danger, passion, possibly heartbreak. I was choosing it with open eyes. The storm that had brought Matteo into my life had changed its course forever. And as Salvatore drew me into his arms, I realized I wouldn't have it any other way.